Hello. Today I'm going to talk a bit about spoken language. I think the thing that surprised me most when I first started reading about spoken language and studying spoken language was finding out just how much we know about it as a rule-based system. Many of us study written language as children in school, learning about how to write sentences, nouns and verbs, paragraphs, and so on. And we learn all these rules. Whereas for spoken language, it seems like we just learn it through osmosis. We hear people around us talk, and we learn to talk, not just the language itself, but we learn about the features of spoken language, how to use the words that we learn properly. And we just seem to think that spoken language is something we're born with, but it's not, right? We learn over time to follow certain rules just like we do with written language. So that's what I want to talk about today. Now, first, for just 1 minute, I'm going to talk about written language to give us a contrast, right? With written language, these are some of the things we know about it, right? Because historically it's been considered more prestigious, the people who could write in the past were the educated classes, the clergy, some of the merchant class. They had to write in order to keep track of buying and selling and so on. And these were people with money, these were people with power. And the fact that they could write led to written language being associated with that power and with that money. And that seems to carry over even to now, right? Someone who can write well is thought of as being more intelligent, when it's fair to say that speaking well is just as difficult, and that people who speak well have just as many oratory skills at their command as a writer does at his or her command when she or he writes well. Written language typically is designed, as it says, for permanence, right? People took time, they created it with care because it was designed to be kept in the form of written records in order to pass knowledge down over time, religious knowledge, legal knowledge, and so on. So care was often taken to craft it. Imagine even in the past when paper was just expensive, right? Things are obviously different now. We can write when we send text messages and so on, and the marginal cost is very small. But when it came to writing in the past, just the cost of the materials was expensive. And so people took care to craft messages that would last for a long time, for all time, maybe in their minds. And because written language can be revised, you can cross out mistakes and rewrite them, and you can plan and write. It often ends up looking more perfect, in that we don't see the mistakes that a writer makes because she or he eliminates them prior to showing the final version. Whereas when we talk, we can hear those mistakes. People make mistakes, and of course they can correct them by saying what they said incorrectly. They can say it again, but we do hear the mistake when it's said the first time. For spoken language, some of those things then immediately contrast. I just use the word immediately contrast, right? Spoken language is not designed for being kept over a long period of time. It's produced immediately, right? The amount of time between when you have a thought and when it comes out of your mouth in speech it's amazingly fast, right? You're constantly doing something that is if you spend time thinking about it, it's completely amazing how quickly we can listen to someone talk, compose an answer in our heads, our mind, and then produce it. And it may not be flawless. We hesitate, we stutter, but generally that we can do this so quickly is amazing to me. Spoken language is individually distinctive. You hear someone talk and you know who they are once you get to know them reasonably well, right? You pick up the phone and you know immediately it's your aunt, it's your grandmother, whatever. So people talk about an author's voice in writing, and that may be something you study in literature, and that may be true that you can detect who an author is from his or her writing, but it's not as obvious as with spoken language, where we get to know people's voices and can tell who they are immediately. Spoken language is a lot more interactional than written language. Of course, you can write back and forth to people, but there's no interaction of that type when you're reading a newspaper or reading a novel, right? Whereas with spoken language, you can do these things. It says here, you hear someone talk and you're not quite sure what they said, so you can ask them a question. You can clarify, sorry, did you mean this? Did you mean that? Topics can change with remarkable speed based on what's happening in the interaction. Limitless number of topics are possible, right? Written language tends to, not always, but tends to focus on a certain topic. This is a newspaper article about this topic. This is a movie review about this particular film. A spoken interaction, especially an informal one like a conversation, people jump from topic to topic with great speed. As it says in the last 2 points here, a lot of spoken language relies on implicit communication. We tend to talk to people that we know, right? Think of the talk that you have, all the talks you had over the last week. Most of them are probably with people that you know. This may not be the case for talk at work, of course, where you may interact with strangers, but you talk to people you know a lot, and you often, not always, talk while you are with them, right, in the same physical space, which allows for implicit communication, right? Think of the way that you can tease someone that you know and that you're with, and you can say things, horrible things. You can say, "Oh, you're such an idiot." But they know from the fact that you're friends already, they know you don't mean it in a hurtful way. They can see your face. You can have a facial expression that shows that you're joking. You can smile as you say it. Your intonational pattern, you're such an idiot. It sounds quite different than "you're such an idiot." And so it allows you to be implicit. You say you're such an idiot, but implicitly you mean, I'm goofing around with you. I'm joking around with you. That's not always the case, right? But often the case. Whereas think of written language, writing "you're such an idiot" to someone could potentially be dangerous, right? We're all familiar with the fact that people write "you're such an idiot" in text messages, and they write joke, or they put a little smiley face, or they write JK or something like that, to really make it clear, I don't mean the denotation "you're an idiot, you're a stupid person." I'm using the connotations of "you're an idiot," connoting we're close enough as friends that I can tease you by calling you an idiot and you won't be offended. And I know you won't be offended. Spoken language's purposes are many, right? Probably the most common one you use it for is phatic communication. Phatic here means for social purposes. You're not really talking to inform someone about something. You're making your phatic communication is often said to be the language used to build and maintain social relationships. Right? Why do parents teach their kids to say thank you so often? You must say thank you. It's not really for the informing act of I thank you, I give you thanks for whatever it is you did. It's for the social act of saying I'm a polite person who says thank you for gifts or for services, favors that were done for me. Thank you, you're welcome are really there for the phatic purpose of maintaining our social relationship. If you do things for me and I don't thank you, we won't have a very good social relationship. You'll think I'm rude. You'll think I'm taking you for granted. So we do that, and we teach children from a young age about that phatic nature of language, especially of spoken language. How are you, right? Is how are you really a question looking for information? Sometimes, right? You're talking to a close friend, you're talking to the doctor, or rather the doctor would probably ask you that, and they want the information about your health. But often how are you is just a greeting, right? Another way of saying I acknowledge you, I know you. Even if you don't have time to talk, you still say how are you? How are you? Fine, great, see you soon. And nobody takes offense at that. Well, he didn't wait to really hear how I am. You know that it's just there as a bit of social language in order to maintain our social relationship, right? If I pass you in the hallway at the university and we know each other and I pass you and don't even look at you when you say, how are you? There's the end of our social relationship. You'll say that guy's rude, that guy's a jerk. I'm not going to waste time trying to build and maintain a social relationship with him. I say build and maintain a social relationship. You could say make friends. You don't necessarily want to make friends with everyone that you say thank you, you're welcome, how are you to, right? So of course, sometimes social language leads to friendship. Phatic communication can lead to friendship, but often we don't really want to go that far. You don't necessarily want to make friends with me. I don't necessarily want to make friends with you. That's not a bad thing. But we certainly, for the most part, want to maintain good social relationships. So we say, hi, how are you? Thank you, you're welcome. Nice day, talk about the weather, stuff like that. Even things like this, you see I've written too many spiders, and you may think, well, how can that be social language? What I mean here is that my neighbor Alex and I sometimes come out into our back gardens at the same time. We see each other over the fence and we have a little chat. And I find myself thinking about how, recently he came out and I said, how are you doing, Sean? Yeah, good. Alex, how are you? Good. And then I said something like, yeah, but there's too many spiders. And I talked about how there were spider webs here and there and they get in my face, right? And, my daughter walks and she's shorter than me, so she goes under the spider web and doesn't notice. And then I walk through and it sticks to my face. So I say, too many spiders. And then he says, yeah, spiders everywhere. And we have this discussion about spiders and getting spider webs on our glasses. And we talk for 10 minutes or something about spiders. And I find myself thinking, neither of us really care about spiders, right? We're not arachnologists who study them for a living or anything. We don't really care about spiders. We just want something to talk about. That whole conversation wasn't really for information about spiders. It was to maintain a good social relationship. If he comes out and says, hi, Sean, and I say, hi, Alex, how are you? Fine. Good. Have a nice day. Well, that's something. But having a more elaborate conversation where it doesn't matter what we talk about, all that matters is that we're talking. We could be doing anything else. I could be doing anything else. The fact that I choose to spend my time talking to him and vice versa, that he chooses to spend his valuable time talking to me, regardless of topic, that tells us something about how we're using the language as a form of bonding, right? Of building and maintaining that social relationship. We're good neighbors, right? I think we get along well. That comes from having spent that time over the years talking to each other, sometimes about important things and sometimes about, topics that don't really matter, like spiders. Spoken language has other purposes, right? You can give lectures like I'm doing now to refer to things. Spoken language can be transactional. You want to get something done, right? Open a new bank account, enroll on a module at the university. Those are also purposes of spoken language, but those are purposes of spoken language that also mirror things that we do with written language, right? You can have, when you read a textbook, that's referential. When you write an email about a problem with your internet and how you'd like to get it fixed, that's transactional. Written language can be phatic, but so much of our talk is phatic. So much of our spoken language is phatic communication that it's really important to highlight that. People who think about chit-chat only quickly, about having conversations, chit-chat, light talk, they'll say, oh, it doesn't really have any purpose. But in fact, most of our time talking is spent in phatic communication, and it's got that very important purpose of building and maintaining social relationships. Spoken language can also be, as it says here, expressive language, right? Designed to talk about our feelings, our state of mind, right? We do that a lot, right? Which we may do with writing, but people spend a lot of time talking, with people that you're close to. How was your day? How are you feeling? What's wrong? Giving advice, empathizing is another major purpose of spoken language. The word that we use to describe the differences between types of language is mode, right? Most of us have two modes of language, spoken mode and written mode. Some people have a third mode. People who can sign have the signed mode of language, right? American Sign Language, British Sign Language. That's another mode, but unfortunately most of us only have two, spoken and written. So spoken language is spoken mode, but we can divide it into further categories, right? Sometimes we speak one-to-one, right? We have a chat, sometimes one-to-many, like now it's me talking to many of you. A job interview is the opposite often. You have a job interview panel who are all talking to one person, many to one. Or a discussion group can be many to many. These are the kinds of things that you could take note of so that when it comes time for you to describe and analyze spoken language, these are the kind of words you could use, right? You can say things like, this is a one-to-one interaction, or this is a one-to-many interaction. And what you can then do is think about how would it be different if it was a different mode, right? In a one-to-one interaction, for example, there's probably a lot more of that phatic communication. In a one-to-many, that's not possible, right? If I come into a lecture, a physical lecture, I will have a bit of phatic language. Hello, everyone. Good day. How are you? Something like that. But I can't really go around and talk to each person one at a time. By the time I finish, the allocated time for the lecture would be over. It just wouldn't be possible. Some spoken mode interactions are in person, some are at a distance, right, through telephone calls, and now, of course, we have video calls where they're at a distance, but some of the features of in-person communication are possible. We can rely on gesture and facial expression and so on. The tenor is another word, and this is the last one I'm going to talk about in this section of the lecture. Tenor. Many of you know tenor as meaning formal or informal, and that's a good place to start. We will talk more about it at another time about tenor. That's a good thing to remember, a good term to remember when analyzing a language, any mode, but particularly now we're talking about spoken language. The tenor can be formal or informal. You make word choices based on formality, right? With an informal tenor, you might say, hey, I got your note. You might say, hi, hello, I got your note. More formal tenor, good afternoon, I've received your message, something like that, with a formal tenor. So the word choices, the grammatical choices, right? In a more formal tenor, have you been there? You've got the full grammatical form, whereas informally, you been there. You've got ellipsis of the verb have, which, have in have you been there contributes to the grammatical correctness, but it doesn't really contribute to the meaning. If I say, you been there, with rising intonation like that, it's a question. You don't need the have. Have makes it a question, makes it an interrogative, right? Have you been there is an interrogative, and you'd know that just from reading it. You been there, just from reading it, could be a declarative, you been there, or it could be an interrogative, you been there? With spoken language, we can do that, we can make that clear with intonation, and we will talk more about intonation later. And other features of prosody. Prosody, which will also be discussed later. Remember, this is just an introduction. Prosody refers to all of the things when we talk except for... Alexa, stop. How embarrassing. But I'm going to just keep it, right? You can have a little chuckle at me, at my Alexa. Prosody refers to all of the things that we do when we talk other than the words themselves. So how quickly we speak or how slowly, how loud or how quiet we are, the intonational patterns that we follow, all of that is prosody, right? You've got a word like H-E-L-L-O. That's the word. The prosody means, do I say it quietly, hello, or loud, hello, hello, quickly, or hello, slowly. It can be a question, hello, somewhat sarcastic question, hello. All of that is prosody, the way that you say the word. And so we'll talk more about prosody. Here I'm just pointing out that with tenor in relation to prosody, typically the more formal we're being, the more slowly we speak. A typical rate of conversation is roughly 180 words per minute. In a conversation with people you know, you could expect roughly 180 words per minute. In more formal language, we get down to, I've seen estimates and read some data about it being maybe more like 160 words per minute in a lecture. A news broadcast, also slower, 140 words, something like that maybe. Hip hop, some rappers get up over 200 words per minute when they're really going quickly, right? So anyway, that's how prosody affects tenor. So that's all I want to say for now for this introduction. We'll talk more about some of these in more detail later. Thank you very much.